We're good.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. We did our intercultural analysis on the 1998 movie Rush Hour. My name is Cameron, and I will be starting this presentation. Rush Hour is about two police officers with widely different cultural backgrounds who must work together for a common goal of solving a case. As the integration of these two quite juxtaposing upbringings come together, conflicts and misunderstandings ensue as these two police officers try and put their heads together to navigate the best means to resolve a complicated case. The cultural backgrounds of both the main characters, Lee and Carter, lead to conflicts when attempting to work together. Carter exhibits many over-exaggerated American cultural values within this movie. He is individualistic because he strong-arms every situation, makes his presence known with his outlandish recommendations and ideas, and is very self-expressive and independent. He exhibits low context culture with his constant concern for his identity, direct language, and always speaking his mind without any filtering. The elaborate style of communication is showcased in his very rich, expressive language. He always uses a lot of descriptive and rich language when talking to people. He is very analytical in thought, as he uses only his past experiences to make true of the reality he sees. This happens when he assumes that China looks exactly like Chinatown in Los Angeles, and when he assumes Lee does not speak English. Carter is very indulgent as he emphasizes the importance of instant gratification, even on the job, whether it be with women or food, and he never accepts fault. He initially showcases cultural incapacity to Lee by being very stereotypical and not hearing Lee's perspectives by assuming he is a non-English speaking, incompetent person, but it gets better as the movie progresses. He showcases very defensive and controlling strategies as he attempts to force people into unwanted conversations and situations and never yields when people show hesitance. Lee, on the other hand, showcases this collectivistic culture by caring about others more than himself and holding honor and respect very highly. He showcases this especially when he is around the ambassador, as he listens to everything that he is told and follows rules of those in higher positions accordingly. When he speaks, he says things as they are, succinctly, which highlights the high context culture. Lee is indirect as he lets Carter speak first when they initially met and remained quiet and subtle to test Carter and his ruminating assumptions. Lee has much restraint as he does not feel as though he has time for fun or playtime and really highlights the importance of working hard for the good of others. Lee showcases initial cultural blindness as he does not attempt to relate to Carter in any way, and he really tests and plays with Carter's ignorant and racist assumptions. He never argues with his boss and always yields to what he is told. He obliges and compromises with Carter's dominating opinions, advice, and strategies, and rarely tries to strong-arm a situation as Carter fills up the room. Next slide.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Kylie, and I'll be talking about the language and communication style between Carter and Lee. In the movie, Carter is a Los Angeles police officer who is partnered up with Lee, a Chinese police officer. Their differences in language are immediately made apparent when Carter assumes that Lee does not speak English. Carter is set to pick Lee up and take him to the consulate. However, Lee does not speak a word for the majority of the time that they're traveling to their destination. After Lee yells in Carter's face, Carter later finds out that Lee, in fact, does speak English, but a language barrier still remains. Since both characters speak English, the language barrier that remains is due to the fact that Carter speaks in an accent that derives mainly from Southern California, using a lot of jargon and metaphors that are local to the city. Carter does not code switch or change his dialect to accommodate someone who does not understand on behalf of Lee. Since Lee is not a Southern California native speaker, he does not understand many of the metaphors and dialects used by Carter. The humor displayed in the movie itself is based on the language barrier and how they communicate with each other while conducting their investigation. Their relationship and the plot develops over time because they eventually learn how to communicate with each other. There are four main types of communication styles: passive aggressive, and assertive. Lee displays a passive communication style because of his easygoing attitude, withdrawing personality to go along with Carter's decisions. Lee shows that he is work oriented solely after his goal as a police officer to solve the case at hand and not much more than that. On the other hand, Carter displays more of an aggressive or passive aggressive communication style. He uses indirect ways to communicate with Lee, such as body language or being verbally aggressive with Lee. Their accustomed styles of communications leads directly into how Lee, a non-native English speaker, is able to effectively communicate in a very rudimentary and simple way. The movie shows their friendship developing as Lee attempts to learn the intricacies of Carter's use of language and to understand commonly used metaphors and jargon. Viewers learn that despite the jargon and metaphorical barrier, the two learn from each other and get along without a hitch. Each of the characters' social structures has an effect on how well they communicate with each other. Social structures are patterns in social arrangements that display the status of a group or person. The two lead very similar lives, as Lee is a police officer in his home country and Carter is a police officer in his home country. Socially, they both lead the same lives in their respective countries and do not display much of a difference in their social status structures. Next slide.
Hi all, I'm Sion, and I'm going to talk about their identities. So, Detective James Carter is an African-American cop. His identity is loud, bombastic, sporadic, and he is also very self-assured. So more on his personality, James Carter is well aware of his abilities as a detective. And with that said, he wants everyone to know that he's a detective, and he goes over this multiple times in the movie. So unfortunately, his arrogance and his go-it-alone mentality frequently leads to him going into difficulties with his superiors, and he believes that it's too risky to be untrustworthy or to be trusted. So with that said, I'm going to talk about the identities of his counterparts. So Detective Lee is meticulous and he is focused. So Inspector Lee has a dry sense of humor during the movie, and he also doesn't have time for antics because he's very focused on saving So Young's life, because her life is on the line. So Lee makes a point of calling out Carter's identity during the movie whenever he says something stupid. And this is very interesting because their personalities actually clash, because one of them is mouthy, one of them is sporadic, and the other one is focused and quiet. So the communication styles of these two detectives differ because you can see that Lee is more on the laid back side and he's motivated to help and solve the case, while Carter is easily distracted because he wants to go around doing other things other than the case. And Carter sometimes is lacking social awareness because he says some jokes that are racist, but he doesn't interpret them as that. He thinks that they're jokes. So nevertheless, this duo complements each other very well because they're exactly what the other person needs at certain points in the movie. Next slide. So I'm going to talk more about social identity and how this has to do with stereotypes. So what is social identity? So social identity refers to a person's membership in a social group, and it's also the common ground that compromises a person's social identity. So this includes age, ability, race, gender, religion. These are all things that can be a person's social identity. So with that said, a lot of people feel that they have to act a certain way because of their social identity or because of the race, and this would be called stereotypes. So Rush Hour actually showcases a numerous amount of positive stereotypes and a bunch of negative stereotypes. So what are some of these? Well, Jackie Chan, who is the actor that portrayed Lee, his role embodied the contemporary notion that Asians are diligent and respectful and they're decent citizens. So some examples of these positive stereotypes for their social identity would be Tucker, that believes that Chan is a kung fu master. This would be a positive stereotype because it showcases superior ability. While Tucker enjoying Chinese food, Tucker is the actor who played the African American in this case. So Tucker, who played Carter, he enjoys Chinese food, which would be a positive stereotype because this deceives from the norm that African Americans only like a certain type of food. While Chan claims that all white people are noble, and this would be a positive stereotype of normal perfection. However, there are some negative stereotypes that are also portrayed in the movie that showcase weakness, generalization, and moral blunder. Now, what were these? Well, Chan claim that Tucker talks too much, and this is a flaw. So this would be a negative stereotype. So his social identity would now be contrasted because this is a negative stereotype. Tucker claims that Chan looks like all Asian people. So he's saying that all Asian people look the same, and this is a generalization, and this would be a negative stereotype on Chan's social identity. While Tucker claims that all white people are racist. This is a moral failing. This is a negative stereotype that he is encompassing on all white people. So these highlight that the social identities in both of the characters and how these stereotypes can be used to define their actions for the audience to enjoy. And that is the whole plot of Rush Hour. Next slide.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I'll be talking about cultural conflicts of nonverbal communication and ethnocentrism. Differences between nonverbal communication across cultures can be seen in the scene we're about to show, where Carter sits down in a Chinese restaurant. At the restaurant, a waiter comes by with food, and as Carter smells the food, his facial expression immediately turns to disgust, and he begins to shoo away the waiter. Carter, who is from an individualistic culture that freely displays emotion, did not hold back in showing his distaste towards the food. The nonverbals Carter used to display his disgust were his face and his hand motions as he shooed away the waiter. Lee, who is from a collectivist culture where emotions are not often displayed in order to preserve the harmony of the group, may have been shocked and very offended by this reaction if present in this scene. Ethnocentrism can also be seen in this scene because Carter's nonverbals communicated that he may believe that his culture and his culture's food are superior to Chinese culture, considering the reaction he had towards this Chinese food dish.
That's your boy? Yes, let's go.
Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles?
Thank you. Yeah. Welcome. What's that?
Next slide.
That's your boy? Yes.
Okay, there are many strengths and weaknesses in the intercultural communication that ensues in the movie Rush Hour. Some strengths are when Carter likes the Chinese food Lee recommended after initially dismissing it, and it was a step closer to attempting to integrate this certain aspect of Chinese culture, but a counterpoint of that strength would be the initial weakness of how Carter dismissed the Chinese food before even trying it, showcasing ethnocentrism because he shoos it away and says that it smells bad without even giving it a chance. Another strength is realizing that body language shapes who a person is, and it would create a better environment when trying to navigate intercultural interactions. So acknowledging that somebody has a different way of speaking with their nonverbals is really important when navigating intercultural communication interaction, because everybody speaks a little differently when it comes to using nonverbals. Lack of code switching is a weakness on Carter's part because he assumes that Lee will automatically know Los Angeles jargon and his cultural jargon as well, using the N-word at one point, and Lee reciprocates that, which doesn't lead to the best outcome for Lee in the scene that he uses that word. And then from the lecture video when we were watching in class of the Doing Business in China, it showcases the acknowledgement and emphasis of relationship building in China and the loyalty they have to long-term successful relationships, which is showcased in the film where Lee's loyalty and respect toward the ambassador is very paramount. Final weakness of the intercultural communication throughout the movie is not allowing collaboration and knowledge from Lee, as Carter is very dominating and creates initial conflict. And Lee's loyalty and respect toward his ambassador opposes Chris Tucker's lack of respect toward his boss, police captain, which showcases the root of many conflicts they have in this film, as Lee's culture is very respectful to people in higher positions and Carter's culture is not as respectful. So how to improve Lee's and Carter's intercultural communication? The first step is being aware that one culture is not superior over another. And the next is that Carter believes Los Angeles American culture is better than Chinese culture, so he belittles Lee and his personal perspective. So it's great to get rid of that notion that you believe that your culture is better than any other. Listening before speaking is probably the most paramount step of integrating intercultural communication, and it would have saved Carter many times as his assumptions exhibit lack of cultural relativity. Lee could have done fewer tests against Carter and could have showcased more understanding to attempt acculturation a bit quicker. Understanding that some aspects of an individual culture cannot be adopted from outsiders. For example, the jargon and some of the colloquialisms that are used in the film would not be appropriate for Lee to use, as well as it showcases that is inherent in his own culture. And lastly, having an open mind toward different foods, languages, perspectives, and ways of addressing situations could have created a more enmeshed environment rather than a competition between Carter and Lee. So that was our presentation on an intercultural analysis on Rush Hour. Thank you so much for watching.